Good afternoon and welcome to our 2021 conversation with senior leadership. I am going to open the conversation with the reading of our land acknowledgement statement. As a land grant institution, the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign has a responsibility to acknowledge the historical context in which it exists. In order to remind ourselves and our community, we will begin this event with the following statement. We are currently on the lands of the Peoria, the Kaskaskia, the Piankashaw, the Wea, the Miami, the Mascoutin, Odawa, Sauk, Meskwaki, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Chickasaw nations. It is necessary for us to acknowledge these Native nations and for us to work with them as we move forward as an institution. Over the next 150 years, we will be a vibrant community inclusive of all of our differences, with Native people at the core of our efforts.
Thank you, Robert, and welcome to our annual conversation with senior leadership. I'm Robin Kaler, Associate Chancellor for Public Affairs. I'll be moderating today, but the important people you really need to know are the ones who are going to be telling you a little bit about what they're thinking and answering those questions that you submitted to us. We all know Chancellor Jones, of course. With him today, our Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs and Provost Andres Cangaleras, Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation, Susan Martinez, Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Sean Garrick, Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Danita Brown-Young, and Vice Chancellor for Institutional Advancement, Barry Benson. Chancellor Jones, would you like to offer some opening thoughts before we get started?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Robin. As I hope our audience knows by now, this is an annual counterpart to my fall State of the University address. This is the 5th edition of this event. And as always with this one as well, our goal is really to have more of a free-flowing conversation among the 6 of us. This is our second year doing this virtually, but I think we've all learned this year that there's nothing like being in the room with each other, but that does not prevent us from having a very robust conversation and debate in this virtual format. And that's one of the things we've garnered here and benefited from here at Illinois. So as we react with one another today, I hope you'll see that we all bring somewhat different viewpoints and perspectives on every issue. But when it comes to the decisions about our current status and our ambitions, all 6 of us are involved in each and every one of those choices. So we believe you should have the chance to really hear from all of us today. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it back to Robin so we can get this conversation started. Again, thank you all for being with us today.
And thank you, Chancellor. And I do want to thank everybody who submitted questions. Obviously, it's hard to have a conversation responding to what you're thinking if you don't tell us what you're thinking. So we are grateful for that. And a lot of you did have really good questions for us. We likely can't get to all of them. We are going to go through all of the topics that were most frequently raised, as we always try to do. But today I'd like to start, as usual, with a couple of general questions. This year, they will be related to the COVID pandemic and our future coming out of it. After we've gone through that discussion, then we'll get into the questions that you have submitted for us today. So the first 2 questions are for everyone on the panel. I'm going to start with Chancellor Jones, and then we'll kind of work our way around the virtual room. Chancellor, can you tell us what has been the most challenging aspects of this year for you?
You know, I think the most challenging aspect for me has been the need to make sure that we responded rapidly and effectively after the realization that COVID-19 was in fact a pandemic and was going to have a profound impact on every operational aspect of the university. So I have to admit it was rather unsettling to think about how we needed to transform every operational aspect of this university. And we only had about 12 days to do it. And how do we make sure that we had the appropriate structures in place to ensure the successful transformation to remote learning, and how we could move forward with the beginning of the next academic year in a way that would keep the whole community safe and with lack of assurance that any of that was going to be successful. To me, that was certainly the most unsettling part of the crisis.
Thank you. Andreas, can you offer your perspective?
Well, the Chancellor said it very nicely, but let me build on that and say that one of the things that was very difficult for me was thinking about the students. I mean, these are young people during a time that their personality is formed and shaped by their social experiences and encounters, those random collisions that happen if you're in a vibrant community like our campus. And that's why one of the first things we all tried to do was trying to think of a way in which we can bring the students back in the fall, make sure that some of those experiences that are so important to their development continue to be part of their development as members of our community. I think we did a very good job, as good as possible, given all the concerns about safety and everything else. That has been one of the most difficult things for me.
Thank you. And continuing on that student focus, Danita, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Continuing on with that, I think the most challenging aspects for me were the impact on people, on their personal and their professional lives. When you think about the students and the impact that it had on the student experience and how our students engage with one another. And, particularly thinking about our first year students who really longed for this collegiate, traditional residential experience that didn't quite happen in the way that they had always dreamt about. The impact on student learning and in people's learning styles and communication, the impact on people's mental health, the increase in stress and anxiety and depression and not being able to interact with people like we have been accustomed to, I think was a very challenging aspect to keep people just kind of focused and moving forward. The financial impact to individuals, we had a lot of students who lost their jobs and or people had to take reductions in their own personal budget. The increase in food insecurity was definitely a challenging aspect, I think, across the board. So, we've had many challenges, but I think we definitely have rose to the occasion to address these issues.
Great, thank you. And Susan, a major research institution, lots of impacts there, right?
Yeah, Robin, I think though, it ripped the Band-Aid off of our most vulnerable issues. And I have to say that in my world of research and innovation, it's consistent with our campus and really the global issues, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know Sean will talk about that more, but it's really the core value of our value system. Our women's scholars shared their serious time crunches as they had to dramatically ramp their efforts to manage their home and family lives as they sheltered in place. Those with disabilities or medical sensitivities are particularly hampered in our COVID ecosystem. And our programming, for example, through our research park, the Odyssey program and the Humanities Research Institute, or just bringing our students into our labs and our field work to bring those experiential and educational opportunities to underrepresented populations was really challenging. I like to think of this spotlight, though, on these issues and the ways we work to address them will really help us moving forward, though. So it's an opportunity also.
Thank you. And Sean, could you pick up from there?
Sure. Thank you. Let me say good afternoon to everyone. I think it's a lot. I think everyone's, at least thus far, has really touched on it. I think I've been taken aback by the impact on not only students, I mean, certainly students, but also the faculty and staff of this community for a couple of reasons. On top of COVID, you think about the awakening, let's say, that the country has gone through over the past year, the culmination of the Chauvin trial, for example. One of the great things about a university like this is the power to convene and to bring people together, not only to get to solutions, but just to process. And in many ways, we didn't have that ability, or at least that ability was significantly altered. So how do we bring people together? How do we let them know that this is their space? How do we invite them to be their whole selves, right? As Danita and Andreas and Susan mentioned, we're talking about the residential experience. How do we do the equivalent of that? So I think that was, to me, the biggest challenge of this past year.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sean. And Barry.
Yeah, Robin, I'm actually going to echo some of Sean's comments there and shape my discussion here into two parts here, because I think we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge some of the folks that are participating on the call today. And certainly that's the efforts of our faculty, our staff, and certainly our advancement personnel, who really all across campus have continued to engage our alumni and our friends in their living rooms, their kitchen tables, if they're lucky, their spare bedrooms or even home offices here. And I anticipate we'll have another good fundraising year once again this year, but it certainly hasn't been easy. From a broader perspective, 30,000-foot view, it's become increasingly apparent our 450,000 alumni are a microcosm of broader society and our collective communities. And I know each of us can provide ample testimony to the tone and the passion of many of our conversations over the last year have been really unlike anything we've experienced before. And so continuing to reinforce that respecting our differences make us stronger, and emphasizing the value proposition of higher education, and more importantly, the University of Illinois, has never been more important here. And we'll continue to really leverage and navigate those nuances here as we find new opportunities. And I, for one, are excited about looking forward to really what the next couple of months, next 12 months have in store for each one of us.
Well, that's a very good segue to the next question. Then Barry, I'm going to go ahead and go right back to you. Tell me one thing that has made you really proud to be part of the Illinois community over the past year.
Yeah, I spoke about the passion earlier, and passion in nearly all circumstances is a prerequisite, if not a precursor, to philanthropy. I've never been a part of a gift that was made because of indifference. And so as we move forward, appropriately leveraging this passion is going to be absolutely critical, because the truth is, many of the initiatives that we're going to talk about today and those yet to come cannot happen without private resources. And so without individuals, without companies choosing to make a difference, none of this is going to become reality. And so an opportunity exists now, in my opinion, more so today than ever before, where our alumni and our friends are now more than donors. They're participants in the process and catalysts to provide the necessary margin of excellence that our university is known for. And so that passion that all of our alumni and our friends have shown over the last 12 months is really going to carry us forward. And I'm certainly proud to be a part of this process.
Great. Thank you, Barry. And Sean, how about you?
I think Barry stole my answer. It really is, or has been, seeing the excellence, the energy, the enthusiasm of the students, faculty, and staff that make up this community, particularly the alumni. You know, as I think I'm the youngest / newest member of this team. And so all that is Illinois is not that, or not as familiar to me as it is to you. But over the past year, the folks who've graduated, who are connected to the university in some way, shape, or form, the way they've reached out to me and to my office to lend their support, to hear what's going on, it's been truly inspiring. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Truly inspiring.
Great. Thank you. Susan, how about you?
Well, without a doubt for me, our collective partnership to develop our SHIELD ecosystem that certainly became a national model for how to keep our community safe. In research and innovation, it also gave us opportunities in the clinical and applied sciences when the National Institutes of Health that I think everyone knows it's famous now because that's the home of Dr. Fauci. But they came to our ecosystem, they recognized us and asked us to work with them to carry out types of studies that we'd never really done before. And those were critical to understanding the molecular dynamics of the virus, testing, the social issues surrounding transmission, and most recently, vaccine efficacy in young adult populations. And those studies are ongoing. But just to think of that national attraction that came to us because of our SHIELD ecosystem, which we made look easy, and we all know that was a tremendous amount of work by this team, the students, the faculty, staff, and the Champaign Urbana community.
Thank you. Danita.
Well, Barry talked about passion, but I'm going to talk about compassion. And so that is what made me very proud to be a part of this Illinois community. The way people came together to support one another, we really truly had displayed that community of care. We've had continuous programs and services to our students. I mean, our team never stopped serving students. That was always at the forefront. And they never stopped supporting people of the campus community, the external community, to really try to keep people safe and healthy. And I would also be remiss if I did not mention the opening of the student-run food assistance program that really displays the type of compassion and the care that we have at this institution. So very proud.
Thank you. Andreas.
Well, let me start by saying that I'm very excited about what science and technology, innovation, discovery has brought to bear. It reminded us all that we have all the resources we need to deal with crisis, except for one thing, and that is what this community made very strong reminder to all of us, and that is no matter how much science has advanced, no matter how much technology you have available to you to deal with crisis, it takes the people to come together. It takes the community to put together all their passion, compassion, empathy, and make sure that all these opportunities are directed where they needed the most, in the most proactive way. I think what we are learning from this past experience is that no matter how much we advance in terms of science and technology, what we need to focus on is the value, the strength, the power of the community. Urbana-Champaign, in my mind, stands out in the nation as the place that offers an exemplar of how once you bring community and you make it the driver of innovation and impact on everyone, the rest becomes much simpler to deal with.
Lovely, thank you. And Robert, now that all the good answers have been taken.
You stole my opening line. Yeah, all the good information has been provided, but let me just kind of sum it all up for you as follows. I think you all know I am a product of the land-grant university system, very steeped in the mission, our mission as a land-grant university. It was one of the things that attracted me to this significant university and leadership role. I think this past year, what made me most proud is that this university, unlike any other, really demonstrated the contemporary embodiment of a land-grant university in terms of the way that we took an innovation that was designed for our own use to keep our community safe, and now gives me great pride in the context of our land-grant role. We have now extended that capability not only to Urbana-Champaign, but across the state of Illinois, across this nation, and across the world. And I can tell you that is very, very gratifying to see a contemporary version of the land grant mission playing out in real time in the midst of this pandemic, because that's what we're supposed to do. And that's the value proposition that we bring to the table.
Yeah, in a year that was so unsettling and disruptive, it's nice to have some happy things, isn't it? Yeah. All right, now we're going to jump right into the questions. And again, as I said, we got lots of questions on lots of topics. We're going to start with the ones that were asked most frequently so that we can try to address the things that most of you have on your mind. And I'm going to start with Chancellor Jones. This is the $64,000 question. I get asked it by every media outlet. I know you get asked it everywhere you go. Is the university planning to make the COVID-19 vaccination mandatory for faculty, staff, or students?
Well, let me just say as quickly as I can, as succinctly as I can, the university currently is not planning to require COVID-19 vaccines for faculty, staff, and students, primarily because we don't have the authority to do so. However, we are very, very clear, and we're encouraging all of our university community to be vaccinated as soon as they possibly can. And that's a recurring message you're hearing every time there's a gathering of faculty and staff, whether it's the SEC or the Senate meeting. We're all encouraging people to take on that responsibility. Because at the end of the day, the mandatory vaccination is all about making sure that enough people are vaccinated to get that herd immunity to be able to return to pre-COVID-19 kinds of activities. And regardless of how that happens, that is the number one goal. And let me just say that I'm sure people listening in are very much aware that over the last few weeks, started with just Rutgers University as being the only public university that declared very early. But in the last few weeks, we've seen a number of our peer institutions or aspirational peers also decide to make this mandatory, either just for their students or for faculty and staff. But I think it's important to realize that at this juncture in Illinois, we know that there's only about 3 private universities that have decided to do this. And the rest of the institutions are still kind of waiting to see where we're going to go with this. And I know everybody is talking about what happened in California, but I remind you, if you read the fine print, that is a contingent requirement, contingent upon the FDA finally giving full approval for Moderna or Pfizer vaccinations. So it's a critically important issue. We're deeply involved with conversation with the system, with President Killeen and others, in conversation with IDPH to try to do what's best for all of us here in higher education across the state, not just the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. So we're aggressively having conversation, looking at the data to build a case based on data. And that is what's going to drive ultimately where we end up with this important issue.
And speaking of data, one more quick point. We did a survey of students a few weeks ago before they were eligible en masse to be vaccinated. And we found that, correct me if I'm wrong, 90% of our students said either they had been vaccinated or they planned to be when they were able to. So that's pretty heartening as well, isn't it?
Well, it is, Robin, because that's the point I was trying to make. If we had 95% of our faculty, staff, and students that are vaccinated by the fall, then this mandate becomes less critically important for our individual community, because that is the goal of the mandate in the first place, is to drive the level of participation that's necessary to open society back up.
Absolutely. And following on that, with more of our community being vaccinated, what are the plans regarding the frequency of mandatory COVID-19 testing? Will that be rolled back at all?
You know, that is something, again, that we are studying. You know, we're a research university. We like to study things and come up with data-driven solutions. So the testing frequency will stay the same through the end of the semester. I can say that pretty unequivocally, so you can count on that. But the university is exploring options to possibly shifting the frequency of testing this summer or maybe fall, if at all possible, based on consultation that we're having with our SHIELD team, that may provide an opportunity for us to maybe reduce the frequency or the need for saliva-based testing based on the vaccination status of members of our community. And I would just say, stay tuned. You will be hearing more about this in the next 12 to 24 hours in terms of a strategy that we're contemplating rolling out that will bring greater clarity about vaccination status versus the continued need to test twice per week. And we're definitely taking a look at this and pretty excited about some possibilities here, because we know COVID testing fatigue is real, just like COVID fatigue is. And we're trying to be very responsive to that and do what's best for the health and safety of our community.
Great, thank you. Danita, you know, we've talked a lot, the Chancellor just talked about you know, the work to educate the community on the importance of testing and the importance of vaccination, and then to support the community who test positive. You guys have done a great job at Student Affairs and Housing on supporting our students when they've tested positive or been exposed. But obviously, a third leg of that kind of system has to involve discipline. And ours certainly has, and that has been in the news some. Can you talk a little bit about how discipline has been handled, how many students have been disciplined, what you're doing to ensure that the sanctions are applied fairly?
Well, thank you for the shout out to our team who has supported our students. But, our student discipline process is really meant to be educational in nature. And with that being said, of course, students who do not follow the student code, particularly those who do not follow the COVID-19 expectations, they are going to be subject to our disciplinary process under the student code. And this process, which, if you want to find out more about the process in detail, definitely go to our Office of Student Conflict Resolution, or we call it OSCR. They will be able to describe all of the steps in the procedures that go along with that process. But the process protects our students' due process rights. And it starts with an assumption that our students are not responsible for that violation until a preponderance of evidence is found, contrary to what some people may believe. But, for COVID specifically, OSCR definitely received a number of reports from across our community, including, other students, faculty, staff, Champaign, Urbana, residents, CU, PhD, law enforcement, others. And we, once we receive those reports, we definitely are reviewing them, investigating them, and following the protocol and the procedures that have been set forth by our Senate Committee on Student Discipline for sanctioning. But over 1,600 students have been disciplined for COVID-related violations, with over 70 being separated from the university or dismissed, if you will. Over 300 of those students received university housing specific sanctions, and over 1,300 students received individual warning letters. But again, it wasn't just our individual students, it was also our student organizations. So over 45 registered student organizations have been disciplined, and over 800 student and RSOs, they've had their cases reviewed and dropped, or have not been found in violation based off of an evidence that we, found through the investigation process. But one final point I would like to make is that I want people to know that there are checks and balances in this process, and, to ensure that we have the findings that are appropriate, and to include, the application of the sanctioning guidelines, again, from the Senate Committee on Student Discipline, and that there is an appeal process that goes to a different body for an independent review of the case.
Great, thank you very much. It is probably important to note too, you talked about students being dismissed. No one is dismissed forever, correct?
That is correct. So a lot of times people think about expulsion. Well, that expulsion is not even a part of our student code. So we say that they have been separated from the university for a period of time.
Great, thank you, just to clarify that one. And Andres, obviously our students are wanting to be back in class. We want to be back in class, and we have announced that most classes will in fact be in person for the fall semester. Are all instructors required to also teach an online component of classes for the fall? And what's the process for determining how a class is going to be taught, whether it's remote or in person?
Robin, you're right. We look forward to have a condition on campus where it's going to resemble very much what happened in fall 2019. Majority of our classes are going to be in person, and the academic units, as they were planning for their fall schedules, they are the ones that are in charge and know best, as they work with their instructors, what classes can be taught online or not, and how classes can be taught best. Let us not forget, our faculty have been very innovative the past year. They learn a few things about opportunities of teaching online, but they also appreciate the fact that in-person, face-to-face experience makes all the difference in the world in engaging and connecting with the students. So we are asking every academic unit to work with their instructors, consider their cases. If they're teaching in person, acknowledging the fact that this past year, the burden on the faculty was significant, we say, well, make sure that if the class has to be taught in addition to in-person online, because there are going to be other students who are not able to join us, we have many international students, that is being assumed by another instructor. So we're trying to make sure that we ease the stress and tension that was on our faculty this past year as they were trying to accommodate everyone who was engaging with us. Another thing I want to say is there are many cases where a faculty member, whether it's a medical condition or some other responsibilities, have to teach online. And they do that by engaging with the appropriate individual in HR or ADA or in their unit, discuss the case, and decision is being made what is in the best interest of the faculty member and, of course, the delivery, the modality of the course for the students. So we're very excited about the innovation that has been happening in terms of teaching this past year, but also we're very excited about the fact that the majority of our classes, a significant majority, are going to be in person in the fall.
Great. And you mentioned international students, and of course, we are very blessed to have amazing students from all around the world. But in a global pandemic, that raises some additional challenges for our international students. If international students come here, do they risk having all of their classes online? And then they've traveled all the way back for that, or how will that work?
As I said, I expect pre-pandemic conditions in terms of teaching in the fall. So I would like to urge the students to come back. But also, the good thing is that right now, the fall schedule is in place. They should be contacting their units, making sure they have an understanding of the options they have in terms of the courses they're planning to take. By now, I believe most of the modality of the fall courses has been decided. So there's a good deal of information available to them as they make their plans. The most important thing I want to say is I really hope they are able to travel back, especially our international students. Things are transitioning to a much more pre-pandemic steady state, but I'm sure there will be obstacles still that they will have to deal with. We can't wait to see them back on campus.
Absolutely, yeah. And I guess for Robert and Andres, Robert, I'll ask you first. What is the plan for all employees moving forward? We get asked by a lot of folks about, is there a certain date everybody's supposed to come back? Am I supposed to come back? Will there be an opportunity to stay remote somehow? How are those decisions being made?
Well, Robin, they're being made systematically and very thoughtfully from my perspective, because as Andreas has said, our overarching goal is to be back as much with face-to-face instruction as well as work as is practical. But I can tell you, many of you have heard me say that if we expect things to be fully operational and operate the same way it did prior to the pandemic, then I think we've missed an important opportunity in terms of one of the things that we have a group, as I said, that's looking at every operational aspect. One of those subcommittees is looking at the nature of work. What is going to be our remote work policy? How do we determine which employee, what work needs to happen on campus versus remotely? And I can tell you things have to be fundamentally different. Otherwise, I just think we're missing an opportunity. We're very big on operational excellence, where we have to reduce costs and increase efficiency. And certainly that framework has to be a guiding principle as we think about the nature of work, where it takes place, et cetera. Because let me just leave you with one example, and then Andreas can come in. For example, I can't tell you how many stacks of paper I used to have on my desk waiting on me to physically sign and to review them. Someone has to bring them to my office, give them to my assistant. She has to bring them in my office, put them in the pile for me to wait my way through. I sign them, give them back to her. Somebody has to come collect them. Very, very inefficient. Just before I got on this call today, I only had to click a button, go down and electronically sign several documents that would have taken a whole day if you add the collective time. And I did all of that in less than a minute. And so that's a prime example of how we have to learn from this pandemic and have to realize that not only can we teach remotely, doesn't mean that we're going to teach only remotely, but we got to take advantage of those things that can be done electronically, that can be done remotely, that doesn't involve a physical presence necessary on campus. So it's a work in progress. I encourage everybody to stay tuned. You're going to be hearing more about these timelines you're asking about in the weeks ahead. So we are working on it, getting very, very close to getting it resolved. Andreas?
Chancellor, let me just add that One of the things that becomes very clear to us, I talked about community earlier, is that because of that experience with COVID-19 and remote work, we are becoming much more comfortable and much more excited about the opportunity to be a much more family-friendly university, place for people to work as we move forward, and a much more diverse university. I'm very excited about the opportunities of us diversifying our workforce by reaching out and engaging and employing people who do not necessarily need to be in Urbana-Champaign, who can be elsewhere, but because of what they bring to the table, consistent with our activities and our mission, they can be part of this very special university. So I think the opportunities as we think about a return to campus, if you wish, in person or not, are so many. It's really our opportunity to make the best out of it, especially given the value that we all are committed to, a diverse workforce that is in the service of not only the University of Illinois, but the state and beyond.
And I know, Andres, we've talked about the flipped classroom way before COVID, but doesn't it really help you think about how to use the time that you have when you are face-to-face better than maybe we had in the past?
Absolutely, and that's why I mentioned earlier the fact that many of our faculty are thinking much more creatively about the way they want to engage with the students, what are going to be those in-person engagements, and most important, they're becoming much more comfortable with the importance of us to provide more flexibility in the scheduling of the courses for our students. There's so much that is going to be different and is going to be benefiting our students and our faculty and our instructors and everyone else as we move forward. It is for us to take the lessons learned, build on them, and make sure, as I said, that we become a much more family-friendly, person-centered, student-centered university as we move forward.
Great. And Robert, I know from where you sit, you have probably seen the toll that this has taken on humans more than anybody, because I think everybody reaches out to you directly when they're struggling. Can you talk a little bit about how we're supporting employees' mental health and wellness, and especially students, and then maybe Danita could hop in too on that one?
Yeah, let me just say that I think that this is probably in many ways one of the kind of silent crisis, if you will, that only comes to light when we hear directly from students and faculty and staff that one of the downsides of this pandemic, that it has exacerbated an already exponential increase in the number of mental health issues that our students come to this campus with. And because of the fact that I can tell you, COVID-19 has been very stressful on each and every one of us, and creating a lot of sense of isolation and just loneliness in some ways that becomes very, very difficult to contend with. And we heard from our students and our faculty and staff time and time again that this was a growing concern, and we decided we needed to continue to invest in medicine approaches to help with mental health issues, continue to hire people when we could, but that was necessary, but it was insufficient. So we're very, very pleased to have created a mental health working group that, as you know, I asked you and Danita Brown-Young to kind of co-chair that effort. And I think we initially envisioned a group of about 15 people, and the last time I checked, it was approaching 50. And very, very excited about the recommendations that are coming out of that. Very, very thoughtful group that had both faculty, staff, and students, so we could really understand the lived experiences. And so I'll ask Danita to provide our participants an overview of the new strategies that we're very, very excited about, that frankly, I think are going to be what's needed to provide that additional modicum of support to address this critically important issue.
Absolutely. It definitely speaks to that community of care I was talking about, that mental health group, the coordinating team. So many people came out, and, we just kept adding more and more people. It was just spreading like wildfire, which was great to see so many people invested in wanting to help our students, faculty, and our staff. But, how we continue to support our students, like I mentioned earlier, our team never stopped. Our counseling center, offered many services online so that students could really access them when they are needed. We continued with individual counseling, group counseling, and a variety of other outreach resources for our students. But because of the state laws regarding licensure, some of those services were limited for students who currently, reside outside the state of Illinois. But, we never, again, turned our back on those students. We made sure that we offered phone consultations to students who currently reside outside of Illinois to connect them with their local resources. And our counseling center continued to be very innovative when it came to support for outreach and programming. And, they've had the daily mindfulness drop-ins. I don't know if you all have been through those, but, it's a live meditation exercise that happens every day during the week at around 4:15 to help students kind of better manage their stress. They continue to do skill building workshops. They made sure that they were working on safer strategies around alcohol use and marijuana and giving some resilience and coping skills. They continue to do drop-in consultations, but more importantly, we also still continued to market and really increase the awareness of our online tools that were already in place, like our Cognito, which is an at-risk program that provides training on warning signs of stress, the Well-Track program, the MindWise programs that really address anxiety and depression. So we continue to talk to students, talk with students to find out what their needs are and adapt to support them, because we want them to absolutely thrive and not just survive while they're here at Illinois and beyond.
Thank you, Danita. And of course, in addition to mental health and wellness, COVID is still a real threat to our physical safety. Robert, can you talk a little bit about the tangible steps the university's taken to prioritize safety? I mean, PPE, plexiglass. I mean, I remember all this stuff that we've been dealing with for a year.
I'm just going to comment briefly, and I'll ask Susan or anyone else to add their perspective on this. But that has been an absolute criteria for us very, very early on, is that we wanted to make sure that our employees, particularly those that were frontline workers who couldn't do that work remotely, that needed to be on campus, that they were provided all the protection that we could afford to keep themselves safe. And I think we have done that well. And our facilities and services folks have done a fantastic job. And one of the cost drivers that, if you look at the total cost associated with the pandemic, has been to improve the filtration system throughout several of our classrooms and a lot of buildings on this campus, the constant cleaning to keep surfaces clean, and just the rearranging the spaces within our classroom, all was part of this broader effort that has allowed us to, knock on wood, almost complete this academic year the way that we started it, and keeping everybody on campus and engaged. And so we could not be happier with the way that our staff and the way that we've approached the whole issue of creating a physically safe environment. So I'll ask Susan or Danita if they want to add anything to that, but I've been very impressed, and I've always felt very safe coming into any of our facilities because of that effort.
Sure, I can take that next. In the research and field sites, we have always had safety plans. And in the backdrop of the pandemic, we included a COVID safety plan. And I'm just really happy to report that they worked. We've had no evidence of transmission within those spaces. And when I talk to my Big Ten counterparts, it's pretty much the same story. So, things can change. And I think we've shown over the last year that we can pivot and address any new issues that comes up. But we know how to do this. We know how to keep our staff and our research sites safe.
And I would just add, we obviously, as you've heard in this conversation, that we are committed to health and safety of this campus community. And I would just, have to give kudos to our facilities and services staff, because they work tirelessly to ensure that our buildings are thoroughly cleaned, they're properly ventilated to reduce any risk of catching COVID-19. And our F&F staff, they are readily available to consult with any staff member, faculty member about office safety and related issues. And I know that they have, helped us a lot tremendously with all of our offices in student affairs. So, I mean, we definitely take this seriously.
Great, thank you. And Robert, as everybody's saying, lots and lots of staff members have made really, really amazing contributions. And when I say staff, I mean employees all around. Any expectation of a salary program this year? I'll be the one to ask it. Asking for a friend. Yeah.
Hey, that's fine, Robin. Let me say that, let me kind of broaden the question a bit. So as I think we're grateful for all of our community, all of our faculty and staff for the direct and indirect contributions that have led to us having a very successful academic year, notwithstanding COVID. And but we also know that one of the challenges that we have as a world-class university is to make sure that we are compensating not only our faculty, but our staff as well at the level that is commensurate with their level of expertise and the impact that that expertise brings to bear on this university. And just because we're suffering significant financial losses because of this pandemic doesn't mean that supporting our faculty and staff with appropriate compensation still remains at the top of the list for the provost and myself and our chief budget officers as we think about how do we continue to address that issue, notwithstanding a pandemic. And during the time that I've been here, because of financial situations that were created, not by us, but by others, and now this pandemic, we found ways to weather that financial crisis in ways that I'm very, very proud of. And lest we forget, unlike many of our peers, we did not furlough anybody during this pandemic. We didn't cut folks' salaries. We didn't freeze salaries. Some of us, my leadership team, the folks you see on this call, some of us took a voluntary cut in pay with emphasis on voluntary. That's an inside joke. We can talk about that later. But I think it is very, very clear that if it's at all possible, notwithstanding the financial challenges we face, a priority for us is to provide some form of a salary program, if at all possible. The possibilities are looking better. If in fact the governor's decision to keep our budget flat as it was last year for the second year in a row, that increases the possibility. Some of the federal support that has been put on the table to mitigate some of the losses, the substantial losses, primarily in student affairs and really across the whole portfolio of this university has been minimized. So we're continuing to look at this possibility. And our main goal, as Andreas and I and others said to you at the beginning, was we wouldn't cut salaries. That would be the last thing that we would do. But I can tell you the first priority, if we can see a financial path to do so, is to provide some kind of compensation increase. And we're constantly working on that narrative, and you'll be hearing about that in the months ahead.
Great, thank you. Another thing that we've heard a lot is about the states starting to reopen and other states opening and other universities having in-person graduation. And we are having a form of an in-person graduation, but can you explain why we're not having a full graduation ceremony this spring in person?
Well, the reason is that, the size of the events that surround the graduation, when you have the 20,000 plus people in the Memorial Stadium for graduation that we're accustomed to. And it's not so much that, but it's all the ancillary activities that goes along with that, the individual collegiate units graduation where people would gather. And I have to tell you, we're still under restrictions by the state of Illinois regarding the number of people that can congregate. We're still not where we need to be in terms of vaccination. And so we still have to abide by the social distancing rules, capacity for venues that are still in place. We certainly hope that this will be the last year. But what we've decided upon, I think, and what I'm hearing from students that I talk to on the quad and elsewhere, is the next best thing, because we know fundamental for them, there are 3 important days in the life of a student at this university: the day that you apply, the day that you accepted, the day that you enroll, and the day that you graduate. So I guess that there are 4. And not having the ability to cross the stage after completing your degree requirements is the recurring theme that I've heard from students that was the most disappointing thing last year. So we've come up with a strategy called a stage crossing experience. It's not exactly the same, but it is the best surrogate. And I can tell you how many of our students seem to be very enthusiastic about, notwithstanding the fact this won't be in front of thousands of people, but to be in a room somewhere in one of the Cranton theaters with a couple of their family members or friends, have their name called, cross the stage, accept a diploma, do a photo op, and exit the building as quickly as possible. And that's the best we can do. And we're very proud to make this available not only to 2021 graduates, but we're inviting 2020 graduates to come back and participate as well. And I think that we're looking forward to that, because I do think it's going to check that critical box that is very, very important to the majority of our students.
Got to get those pictures for social media for sure. So yeah, get that covered. Sean, you mentioned at the beginning about the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and certainly COVID has pointed out some of the gaps, and I think Susan said kind of rip the Band-Aid off of some of these issues. Can you talk a little bit about what the university's been doing toward this goal? And I know one thing the university did was when Robert created your position and hired you, but can you take us from there?
Sure. Thank you. I think we've been doing a lot, and I don't say that in a self-serving way. I think, over the past, I would say 6 to 9 months, I've partnered with everyone here. Let me rephrase that. All of the other vice chancellors on this call to really help move the university forward. For example, with advancement, we've been working a lot on getting more scholarships, simply to create a more diverse group of students on our campus. With Susan Martinez's office, Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation, we recently launched the Chancellor's Research Program. This is a $2 million a year commitment to fund the work of our scholars that look into systemic bias, systemic inequities across our society. The call to action, which has been looking at what diversity and inclusion really looks like on our campus. Again, with the Office of the Provost looking at things like faculty retention, faculty recruitment, promotion and tenure guidelines. We've also been looking at the student experience, i.e. we bring in a fairly diverse group of students. How do we know what they're experiencing while here? We've been partnering with Student Affairs, with Denise's office, to really get a measure of what the lived experience of a variety of students are, and how can we make sure that we empower them to view this place as their home and live their full selves. The other part I would say of the call to action has been really remarkable is just the engagement. We have a tremendous amount of faculty and particularly staff who want to be invited into these conversations. And I think one of our significant accomplishments has been giving them the ability to weigh in on how the university will move forward. And I think it's been absolutely amazing. And I think with the call to action, it's been over 100 faculty and staff have been participating in this, but I can go on and on, but in the interest of time, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
How about if I have you go on about underrepresented groups, especially students, especially in STEM fields, because of course, that's one of our big strengths.
Correct. So my office in particular, we've been quite active, I would say, with Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, NSBE, other student groups, to really look at that professional development as well as sense of inclusion. Again, the scholarships piece, We've in veterinary medicine, we've partnered with Advancement, for example, to bring in, to get a new scholarship to bring in more underrepresented folks there. The Illinois Scholars Program, where we bring in, I can't remember how many students, but in the order of 35 students per year in a pre-freshman summer intensive welcome to Illinois type of experience that has yielded tremendous results. First year, second year retention rates upwards of 90%, amongst the best in the absolute the best in the country. Again, we're doing a lot. There's also the things that the provost's office and others have been doing around the Sloan USAM program, for example, exemplary mentoring to broaden the participation of graduate students in STEM across our campus. So I think there's a comprehensive portfolio in this space.
And Robert, if I could just briefly add, in addition to the work that Sean is driving directly, we're an engaged university, and we really have emphasized engaging with the public. And one of the initiatives that Sean is involved with, and many others, that is being driven by Wanda Ward in my office, is something called STEM Illinois, where we are reaching down to community partners and to K through 12 and to Ruby Mendenhall and the Nobel project that she's been driving. And I participated in that the last 2 weekends, where these young people, elementary and high school kids, are having opportunity to have a conversation with Nobel laureates. And so this is all part of the ecosystem around STEM that we're trying to create, because I believe that we have to work upstream of the problem as well, of the lack of representation in STEM. And unless we find ways to stimulate more people from underrepresented backgrounds, more female students to get interested in STEM, it does pose a threat, I think, for the ability of this country to stay cutting edge in terms of research, innovation, and discovery. So we're approaching this from multiple perspectives, and very, very proud of the initiatives that we put in place so far.
And speaking of engaging with the world, Barry and maybe Susan, how do we continue to engage even while travel is still severely limited?
Yeah, Robin, it's a great question, and I won't go as far as Susan in terms of utilizing the metaphor regarding ripping the Band-Aid off. She's got a higher pain tolerance than I do, but clearly this has accelerated our efforts to move more digitally and virtually in terms of how we engage our constituency wherever they may be. And I suppose it's an appropriate time to thank you and your team for all of your efforts, and the Marcom professionals on campus as we leverage their expertise to really provide a pandemic pivot to some of our programming. And truth be told, if there is a silver lining to COVID, it's that it's commoditized a lot of our access and our opportunity to our alumni and our friends wherever they may be. And so we're no longer contingent upon taking a show out on the road and renting a ballroom and trying to engage folks wherever they may be. We've seen multiple examples of where a virtual environment has had some success, whether that's numbering in the hundreds for a virtual wine testing, thousands that are participating in book clubs, 10,000 that are participating in Illini Link, and even our homecoming this year had tens of thousands of visitors watching REO Speedwagon participate. So we've got multiple opportunities to continue engaging our constituents wherever that may be, and certainly envision and pursuing continued virtual environments here as we navigate the future.
We'll keep on rolling over to Susan. Did you have anything to add to that?
I'll just say Zoom with a exclamation point, or WebEx, or Ring Central, or Microsoft. I don't think we've missed many steps to make connections. Most of our stakeholders are very pragmatic and get down to the business of doing business. And we might be missing those water cooler conversations and social interactions from mills and mixers, but we're getting the job done. We can do it.
Great, thank you. And let's go ahead and wrap up now. I see we're about out of time. Let's see how quickly we can all see if anybody's got one last thing they want to share with anybody. And I'm going to go back in that order we used for the question number 2. So Barry, can you start us off? Anything you'd like to share before we close?
No, in the interest of time, just sincere gratitude and appreciation for our faculty, our staff, our students, and certainly our alumni. It hasn't been easy for all of us. And so great appreciation to all of those that have participated in this process, not only over the last 12 months, but certainly will continue to do so in the time ahead. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Sean?
I know we didn't have that much time to get to a variety of topics and questions, but I'd like to just invite anyone who's listening, paying attention, please feel free to contact me if you have ideas of how we can engage with you. In our last question, we talked about STEM, but we're also doing a lot of things in the arts. We're trying to get everyone sincerely engaged in our mission. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Susan?
Robin, we are here, and I just want to really encourage those who are able to get vaccinated and start venturing out. We're here on campus, want to get ready to greet those students next fall, and our work is continued, and we are here.
Absolutely. Andreas? Oh, wait, I forgot Danita. Can I go to Danita first? I'm so sorry. I get myself out of order, I'll be so confused.
That's quite all right, Robin. I just want to say thank you to all of our students for hanging in there with us, for sticking with us, for doing your part to keep this community safe. And a major shout out to all of our student affairs team. I mean, we could not have done this without you. I know that we've had a lot of ups and downs, and we definitely canoed the mountains, and they know what that means. But we have definitely been, successful in our endeavors. So thank you for all your hard work.
Here, here. Andreas?
Well, thank you to everyone. And, I guess one thing that is in my mind is how we can all get together and feel all right. And so let's make sure all of us were able to get vaccinated. We do so, and let's get together and feel all right.
Sounds great. And Robert?
That sounds like a Bob Marley song to me, Andreas.
That's what
I like that.
Very
That's
good
what
one.
it is,
Yeah.
Chancellor. One of my favorite songs.
One of mine too. And after that, what's left to be said? Let me just say simply, always have been very proud to lead one of the most amazing universities in the world. In my 5th year now, and it's just been amazing. And my sense of pride, my sense of excellence regarding this university is only increased exponentially during this pandemic. Not having to do anything with me, but having to do with each and every one of you from where you sit within this university. You have really demonstrated what it means to be part of the Illinois family. That's the power of I.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert, Andreas, Barry, Danita, Sean, and Susan for being here today. And thank you to Tina Kausert at Disability Resources and Educational Services. And thanks to Clara Wong from AI Live for captioning for us today. Also, thanks to Martin Lamping from Technology Services, Laura Wilhelm Barr from Special Events, and Allison Vance, August Chess, and Chris Harris, all from Public Affairs. That is all the time we have today. Thank you again for joining us for 2021 Conversation with Senior Leadership. I hope we meet you back here next year, only in the Illini Union. That would be great. As with all of our briefings, this one will be recorded or has been recorded, will be archived. You'll be able to go and see specific questions and answers right where you want them. So if you don't have time to watch the whole thing, you'll be able to go right to the one you're looking for. Everybody, remember, go to the covid19.illinois.edu website if you need information or have questions. And remember, have a great afternoon, get vaccinated, but keep testing. Thank you.